Hello, my name is Lizzie Karen, and welcome to My Dreams of Atlantis. This time I will address the formal education that occurred once a person reached the age of 20. Let's start by talking about the fields of study and how they came about. So, you'll have noticed in my other episodes, I talk about Uran, my brother. So Uran was the first and greatest of the great scientists. But he didn't want the technology that he created to go to people without an understanding of it. He believed that without education, technology would be the equivalent of magic. And if anything ever happened to the civilization, it would just collapse like a pack of cards without that education in place. So the first of the great universities was created, and it was located in the center of Tantal. And it covered all the subject matters, but it became clear in a very short time to Uran that he really needed to break it up into institutions. And he decided that 12 institutions would cover his purposes. Uran asked his best students to help him to create the 12 separate universities. As each one was being constructed, the institution was then separated from the great centre of learning in Tantal. Some were built in a more appropriate location around the world, and others were kept within Tantal, but in a separate building. And the ones that were outside of Tantal, there was generally a good reason for the location that they were put in. The people he asked to help him set up those institutions then became the leaders of their respective institutions. Some of the institutions were controlled by just one person, while others were led by maybe up to 4 people. But they were all people that Uran trusted. Uran still felt that he had to keep control of the knowledge to ensure that none of the institutions were using the technology for anything that he was unhappy with. Maybe he was a bit of a control freak, but in a nice way. He was convinced that although with good intentions, his people could not always see the bigger picture, and that they may do something thinking that it was a good thing to do, or even just to see how far their experiments would take them. So he made a rule that scholars and students were not able to share their knowledge with other universities, nor were they able to use their findings without his permission. So that sounds a bit extreme, but it certainly kept him very busy. He would visit each institution every moon cycle and go through with them all their findings and what they were researching. He would indicate to them what could be shared and what could not at that point in time. Also, if anything had got to a point where it was ready for production, i.e. use, so that the people in general might receive a new piece of technology. So then he would organize for the production and the distribution to take place. So, the various institutions were, number 1, the Great Institute. It was the original institute, and it ended up being for numbers, i.e. maths, for measurement and for time. It was the first university that a student would attend. So the first 10 years of a student's education was always at the Great Institute. I don't have any particularly memorable dreams while at this university. I was still living with my parents in Tantal, even though it wasn't required. I could have gone and got my own place, but no, I was still staying at home, and well, nothing particularly eventful at that point in time. There were only two other universities that were located in Tantal, and they were the University of Medical Studies and the University of Arts and Enjoyment. So the rest of them were all scattered around the world in various places. So the first one outside of Tantal was the University of Theoretical Energy. So this was all about the theory around the options for generation of energy. So in our terms, it covered things like physics, electricity, light, sound, vibration, gravity, magnetism, repellation. I don't know if that's a real word, but it was about like the way magnets can repel each other, and why we can't walk through walls. I know that sounds crazy. Anyway, the next institute, the Application of Energy Institute. So that was quite closely related to the theoretical energy, but it was the practical application of use and the technology associated with it. Number 4 was the University of Alchemy and Philosophy. So it's not quite chemistry, but I think I'll get into that in a bit more detail in another. It's a bit wider than chemistry, but it's I think the old-fashioned word is probably the best for it. The number 5, the Building and Mining Institute. Number 6, the Institute of Water Studies. Then, of course, number 7, Nutrition and Agriculture. Number 8, I've already mentioned, Medical Studies. And I've mentioned number 9, the Arts and Enjoyment Institute. Number 10, Primitives and Animal Studies. Number 11, Earth Studies. So that's things like weather, tide, wind, tectonics, mapping, all the earth sciences. And the last one, of course, was the University of Celestial Movement. So I will go through in more detail each of these institutions as appropriate and where they were located. So the hints that I have from my dreams to where they might have been, and who the main people were that were involved in each one. Thank you, everyone, for listening.